Hello and good day, Algebra. We are starting Unit 7, our final book of the year, where we start some non-linear algebra. You're going to see a lot more variables, a lot more exponents, Leah. But be not afraid, for I will guide you through everything you need to know. We're starting with CO44, find the greatest common factor of a set of monomials. Now, hey, folks, let's settle down, focus up, okay? Starting the greatest common factor of a set of monomials. What does the prefix mono mean? Mono means one. Okay, if you think about like monorail, it's a one-rail track. If you think about monopoly, the word poly means many. You want to be the one who owns many. That's where monopoly comes from there. Okay, but the word mono means one, and the word nomial, so it's kind of a combination there. Nomial just means terms. Okay, so we're talking about one-termed expressions. An example of a monomial would be 18x cubed. Right? We've talked about like terms before. We know that what separates terms is addition or subtraction. So multiplication, the power there, it all keeps as one term. Okay, 18 is the coefficient, x is the base, 3 is the power, 18x cubed is the one term. And then 27x squared is the second term, and then 15x is the third term. And so if you think about greatest common factor, we've done this before. What is greatest common factor? Basically.
It's the biggest number they have.
Yeah. So and instead of numbers, since we are working with variables and powers now, I'm going to use it is the greatest factor that every term shares. Okay? The greatest factor that every term shares. What's the largest thing that goes into each of these terms? So when we're looking at 18x cubed, 27x squared, and 15x, we're going to start with the coefficients. Start with the numbers. What we're familiar with. What is the GCF? What's the largest factor that 18, 27, and 15 all share? Jace? 3. Okay. 3 goes into 18, 27, and 15. It's the largest number that does so. Right? Now we want to look at the x's. And remember, expanded form, x cubed, 18x cubed equals 18 times x times x times x, right? 27x squared equals 27 times x times x. And then 15x is just 15 times x. So when we're looking at the variables, we want to know what's the greatest number of x's. Because whatever x is, it goes into 18x cubed how many times? 3. It goes into 27x squared how many times? 2. It goes into 15x how many times? Once. So how many times, what's the greatest number of x's that each term has? Voltinsky. Just 1. Right? They all have 1x. They don't all have 2. They don't all have 3, but they all have 1. So the greatest number of x's that all terms have is 1, just an x. Okay, I'll put a 1 here because there's just one x there. And so the GCF is the combination of those two things. The GCF is 3x. Right? Question so far?
No.
Andrea? We'll go through it together. So write your answer down and see if you're right. Eli.
What would happen if you two would share like 2x's?
Then it would be 3x squared. Right? If they all had 10 x's, it'd be 3x to the 10. Right? Just how many of that variable does each term have? Other questions? Does this seem as scary anymore? At least the first one?
Yeah.
So? Let's look at the next one here. What is the GCF of the coefficients? We have 32x to the 7th, 40x to the 5th y, and 16x to the 4th y squared. What's the GCF of our coefficients 32, 40, and 16? 8. 8 goes into all of them. Okay? 8 goes into 32 4 times, 45 times, and 16 twice. Now we've got two variables. We have an x and a y. We're going to start with the x's. What is the greatest number of x's that all terms have? So focus on just that x term there. What's the greatest number that all terms have? Colin?
1.
They got more than 1. Jocelyn? 4. Right? If you think about this in expanded form, 32x to the 7th, how many x's does it have? It's got 7. X times x times x times x times x times x times x, right? Okay? Let's just, for the sake of perfection here, let's write out all those 7x's. That's 7, there we go. 40x to the 5th has 5 x's. And 16x to the 4th has 4 of them. Right? So how many x's do they all have? Well, they all have 4. Okay, some have more, but they all share 4 of them. So our term here would be x to the 4th, because they all have 4 x's. And then, what is the greatest number of y's that all terms have? Waltinsky?
0.
0. Why 0? Paul, did your hand up too? Were you going to say
I know
0?
I know
Oh,
why.
Paul, why is it 0?
Because the first one doesn't have y.
First one doesn't have any y's. Okay, so y is not a common factor with all of them. There are no y's in the first term, so it's not a common factor for all of them. So it's 0. And what is our greatest common factor? Andrea? 8x to the 4th. Because they all have an 8. They all have at least 4 x's. They don't all have a y. Okay? So your knowledge of expanded form comes in handy here, right? Knowing what those powers mean. Anyone see kind of a shortcut, though, that you could use here for this?
Look at the y.
To me?
We look for the smallest number of x's.
Yeah, you look for the smallest power. The smallest exponent over that x term represents the greatest number of x's that each term has. Because if the smallest number is 4, that means they all have at least 4, right? So that's the greatest number of x's they all have. It's kind of backwards, okay? Which is where expanded form can also come in handy here. All right, next one.
I already did it.
Thank you. 42x cubed y to the 8th, 14x to the 5th y to the 4th, and 70x to the 6th. Start with those coefficients. What is the greatest common factor of 42, 14, and 70, Maddie?
7.
It is 7. Not 7. It is 14. Sorry. Okay, 14 does go into 42. I always forget that one. And then what is the greatest number of x's that all terms have? The greatest number of x's that all terms share. Katie, they all have at least 3. The first one has 3. The second one has 5, x to the 5th. The last one has 6, x to the 6th. But the greatest number they all have is 3. So x cubed is going to be our term for that one. And then, how many y's do they all have? Poor y. It doesn't get represented here. Will,
0.
again, not all of them have a y, so we can't use it. Okay? Not applicable. So, what is our GCF of the 3 terms? Leah? 14x to the 3rd power. Okay? Thanks for the update, Facebook. Manny?
Can this objective be represented in any way by a word problem?
I think. Could it be represented by a word problem? I mean, yes, but no.
That makes sense.
Yeah. This is a prerequisite skill we'll be using later on. Hey, folks. So this is something that will come up in a future objective, but there won't be any. Your test will basically be like your homework here. I'm not going to make it any different. Paul, you had your hand up?
Yes.
Thank you, Maddie. Okay, your homework for tomorrow is to work through the 8 on this page. This is just a one-pager, starting slow here, and we will talk about it. That Nick. Sorry?
Same thing with the new equation.
Find the greatest common factor of the 3 terms. Andrea,
In something it says like x1 times 3 x3 plus 3.
can you speak up? What?
On some of the equations it says like xy to the power of 3. So would it be like x3 and then y3?
All right, good question. So let's where do we have that here? This one here. Okay, so 48xy cubed. Okay, remember that order of operations, exponents come first. So what is the base of that exponent of 3? What is the base of the exponent of 3 there? Because I asked. Right? So in expanded form, that would look like this: 48 times x, only one of them, times y times y times y. Okay? So that exponent of 3 would only apply to the base it is attached to. There is only one x there. It does not represent the number of x's and y's. Maddie?
Can we go through one of the questions?
Sure, which one would you like?
14, 12.
Yeah. So the last one of the first row there, 14x to the 6th, 12x cubed, and 8. Start with your coefficients. Start with your numbers. What's the GCF of 14, 12, and 8? 2. Right? 14, 12, and 8 is 2. Then we look at how many x's does every term have? How many x's does each term have? First one's got 5 or 6. Second one's got 3. Third one has
0.
So is x a common factor between all 3 terms? No. So the greatest common factor for this one would just be 2. That's all that each one has. Okay. Anything else? Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, comments, congratulations, or criticisms?
Let's get the number game.
Let's get the number game.
Easy.
All right, folks, that's how you math.
Don't forget to like